People tell me the cost of public transport is too high, and it's cheaper to travel in a private vehicle. At first glance, this appears to be true. You are told the cost of your bus ride when you take it, and it looks like a lot of money compared to the cost of petrol, even as it is nearing $3 a litre now. Surely the cost of fuel would be less than the cost of a bus ticket, wouldn't it? And surely the cost of fuel is the only cost we should consider when attaching a value to driving a car. Surely. Without information easily obtained that tells us the costs we pay for the broader impacts of how we travel, we tend to underestimate the total cost to both ourselves and to society of different modes of transportation. This influences our daily decisions about how to commute, and also our views on whether or not to support proposed transport investments and the changes and disruptions they cause. It's not easy to change people's minds. The internal combustion engine came to us as a miracle of convenience. They made long journeys easy. They carry heavy loads. They flatten hills. Petrol packs a powerful punch. Volume produced cheaper cost of production, making vehicle ownership more accessible to more people. Streets that were built for people were once shared with horses, then bicycles, then trams. We mingled, we met, we lived on those shared spaces. And when cars came along, they shared it equally with us at first. But then someone decided that if cars could drive faster, they would sell more of them. Streets that were once owned and used by everyone became available only to a lucky few. They became dangerous moats, separating neighbourhoods and increasing the danger for pedestrians. Motor vehicle emissions contribute to ambient levels of air toxics known or suspected as human or animal carcinogens. Exposures to air toxics can also cause non-cancerous health effects such as neurological, cardiovascular, respiratory, reproductive, and/or immune system damage. Public transport is the most sustainable way to travel in a motorized vehicle, in respect to emissions, in deaths and serious injuries, and also in space. It can free up your time. For many people, phones are not a distraction to driving as much as driving is a distraction to using their phone. It can provide health benefits from the incidental exercise. It is inclusive and provides transport to those who have no other option. The more people use it, the better it becomes. We need people to realize that driving has a cost that is bigger than just the cost of the fuel they put into their vehicle. We need people to know the cost of their decisions and to use that information to influence their choices, to either stop making unnecessary trips involving a vehicle or choose another way of doing it. My main goal is to change the attitudes of public transport as being just for students, poor people, and society's losers. It needs to become a solution to a problem we all know exists. The Auckland Transport Alignment Plan is a joint agreement between Auckland Council and the government. It's a strategic approach to ensure Auckland has a transport system that encourages more people to use public transport, to walk and to cycle. In 2019, Auckland Council declared a climate emergency, signalling the urgency of action needed to mitigate and adapt to the impact of rising world temperatures and extreme weather events. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says we have only around 12 years to reduce global carbon emissions to limit temperature rises to 1.5 degrees. Electric cars will be our saviour, except they are depleting the Earth's sources of cobalt and lithium. What problems will this cause? And if they make it cheaper to drive, won't that just make us drive more, putting even more cars on the road? And they still take up space that people need to create cities that are attractive to live in. They still cost money that many people can't afford, and they just feed our current way of doing things, encouraging us to travel unnecessarily, requiring the building of more roads, and facilitating sprawl out onto productive farmland. Ultimately, the true costs of our transport choices have been hidden from us for generations, and we have adapted into thinking that it's cheap and easy to travel long distances in such a way that we travel without needing to and without thinking about the consequences. We need to start considering these consequences and make decisions to take less damaging methods, or choosing not to travel at all if it is just for the sake of travelling and has no real benefit. So we need to make changes now because lawmakers are moving too slowly to respond to this crisis. We need to look for better options for travel. With 9 of the 10 most sold cars in Auckland being twin cab utes or SUVs, where is my recognition for driving a more fuel efficient car? Where is the love for me choosing to take a bus, bike or walk instead? This solution will help you make an informed decision to allow you to make a difference. The solution won't reward you, but it will show you how to quantify that love. We can use data to enable behaviour change, By creating an information portal that aims to capture the full costs and benefits of driving, taking public transport, cycling and walking in an attractive and easy to understand way, we can fill in the knowledge gap people have. Using the Internet of Things, we can collect existing data to calculate and display the whole of life costs of various travel modes. This will help people to make informed decisions. The whole of life costs would be shown not just for the person driving the vehicle, but for the community and the planet. Apart from the cost of fuel, the cost of providing transport in Auckland tends to be considered only when new infrastructure is proposed, such as a new road, tunnel, bridge or rail line. But little or no public exposure is given to the costs of less obvious impacts like emissions, climate change, accidents, congestion and even noise pollution. This portal will attempt to indicate these costs and compare them between modes. Some of these costs we pay up front while others are paid indirectly. But they all have to be paid for eventually, and so we should consider them in our decision-making process. This app will provide the obvious as well as the hidden costs and benefits to ourselves and society. It would allow people to trade off time and effort versus costs and benefits. The Internet of Things is appropriate for this challenge because the data is already there. We just need to harness it. No new hardware is required. Sending the information to someone's phone will make it accessible to most people, enabling them to compare the costs of their decisions. People need to know there are consequences to their actions. I've got to be realistic and accept that not everyone will be interested in this information. It will attract those who see ongoing motor use as a problem and also keen to adopt a change. It will also be useful to those curious to change. It will not be of any interest to those who reject change and reject this as a problem that won't be solved by other means. The portal would tap into information that is already gathered. Data will be pulled from different platforms onto one functioning display of information on a screen. Data from Google trip comparisons and the Auckland Transport public transport ticketing system can be accessed to compare cost of fares and distance travelled. Fuel efficiency calculators already exist, for example Get Less, which estimates efficiency based on the make, model and age of a car. Deciding on the information needed and finding a suitable data source will be the first step. Accessing this information and building calculations will be step 2. Presenting this in a coherent, colourful, understandable, attractive display will be the next step. The biggest challenge will be deciding what to include and what not to. Data used will be based in part on the quality of data that's available. I don't know how to measure the impacts on the quality of public spaces, feelings of safety, effects on tourism, and how the world sees Auckland. Measuring other impacts, such as accidents, are also complicated. Hospital costs, rehabilitation costs, foregone wages due to premature death or caregiving are hard to measure. And how do I put a dollar sign on things like the impact of congestion or a 10-minute wait for the bus, especially when these costs are different for different people? Time wasted in congestion traffic is usually accounted for using the average wage, but is it that simple? I can't necessarily swap my time for dollars outside my 40-hour working week. So is it really worth that much if I get slowed by traffic on my way home? Getting access to the data will be the next challenge. Privacy of data has no doubt already been promised by the system collecting it. It could be a challenge to get agreement on sharing. The social development and planet resources benefits of the application sit well alongside the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Effects include good health and well-being, gender equality. Women are less likely to own or have access to a car than men, for instance. Reduced inequalities. There are fewer barriers to using public transport than buying a car. Sustainable cities and communities, by sharing resources, makes better use of them, and the negative impacts they have is divided amongst all the passengers, reducing the overall effect. Responsible consumption and production, climate action, life on land. Public transport takes up a lot less space per person compared to individual cars. A full bus can remove 50 cars off the road. Peace, justice and strong institutions. Public transport provides inclusive access to facilities and destinations, regardless of age, mobility, education, background, and in most cases, level of income. It's going to be cheaper to build this type of application to give people the tools they need to adjust their travel than it is to be building more roads and unleashing more cars onto them. I'm anticipating that most data is publicly available. Participants would enter their vehicle details and destination addresses. This information would need to be removed from the system so it cannot be used to track them. The data would be shared so others can use it and improve on it. In the same way that we are now scrutinizing our use of plastics and measuring its cost throughout the whole of its life, not just at the cash register when we pay for it, we now need to look at how we choose to use transport modes. We need to know their full whole-of-life costs and make decisions based on this value. We need to sacrifice some convenience for the sake of the planet. Next steps are to decide on the measurements needed and work out how to calculate them. Then find if data for this is already being collected and if we can have access to it. There are limitations to this tool, but it is a start to get the conversation going.